Okay, now we can say good morning.
Yeah.
Anybody on?
Good
Okay.
morning, Rabbi. I'm here.
I know. Okay. Okay. Oops, that was the plug. You don't mind when you go there just to push the tissue box here. Thank you. Okay, so we're on page 58, 59. And here he does a little summary. We did the questions, we did the terms, and now we're going to do page 58, 59. Also, I'm putting this on the table. This is a little booklet, but a little bit about the Rebbitzin. We're supposed to give it out yesterday, but then you get a chance to. So if you don't mind just putting some out on this table, the other table. We can now explain the connection and the order in the Maimer of the previous Rebbe when he explains the pasuk Veata Tetzave. And here the Rebbe explains the sequence and the structure, the order of that Maimer. B'tchila Mavayir, first he explains that Veata Tetzave's Bnei Yisrael connect. Moshe connects Bnei Yisrael with Or and Sof, with Hashem's infinite light. How's that? Shuzon Mefarnes Amuna. That's through providing us with Amuna and feeding us with Amuna. Which means that without Moshe, we have Amuna, but it's makif, it's not internalized, and Moshe Rabbeinu, he internalizes the Amuna, helps us internalize the Amuna. That's point number one. Point number two, then he explains that not only Moshe, but Shagam Roye Yisrael Shebachol Der, all these shepherds and all the generations, which are Pashtus of the Moshe, they're an extension of Moshe. So naturally, if they're an extension of Moshe, so their function and their role is identical to Moshe, because they're really an extension of what Moshe Rabbeinu is. So they also do the same. The Chaskim Esamuna de Yisrael, Mordechai, just like Moshe Rabbeinu in his generation was like Moshe in his generation. And Mordechai, Chizikus Amonasim Shel Yisrael, he was the one who gave the Yidden strong Emunah, Lamed Chazak, to stand strong against all the challenges that were coming from Haman and Achashverosh, and to stand strong with Limud HaTorah and Kiyum HaMitzvahs, with Torah study and observance of mitzvahs. That's point number two. After he explains that Moshe does this and all the shepherds and all generations do this, then he explains what does it mean, kosis lamor, that it's crushed lamor. It means the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu reveals the essence of our neshama, which gives us the amunah, will be ikar. It's primarily ideas pashtuso delay b'zman hagolus. It's more, we see it more pronounced in the later generations through the later leaders than Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Yeah.
In the same way, there have been false Mashiachs in the past. Have there been false leaders of generations?
False leaders of generations is a contradiction of terms. I guess what you mean to say
ended up not being that important, not more type. Didn't assume like the role of the Rebbe, but that people really thought they would at first.
Actually, with the concept of Rebbe, a leader, I don't know. We have something similar to that with kings. Maybe there were kings who were descendants of King David, and they turned out to be not righteous kings. So we did have such a thing, yeah. But I guess the fact that that happened was a clear indication that not they were the general soul of the generation, but the Navi or some other tzaddik at that time. Okay, so again, Moshe Rabbeinu, when we say he provides us with Amunah, he's not giving us something from someplace else. He is actually activating and opening up the essence of Amunah that we ourselves have, but it's locked or it's hidden, And through Moshe, it opens up and it flows towards, and we feel it consciously.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
So we Moshe, like, coming from Moshe to David on the left. Did that kind of change in terms of like with Moshe, between Moshe and David? I'm not you have people from other like tribes. And Nazi, and then
I don't know if you hear the question, but I'll repeat the question that Ariel is asking. So Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't from the tribe of King David, obviously. He was a Levi. He was in the tribe of Levi. Once we had someone like King David and his children, does that mean that in every generation, the head of the generation should be only someone from King David's descendants? So I'm not sure. It's a good question. In fact, someone brought up this question to me years ago, and still haven't found an answer to the question. The question is Mordechai. Mordechai was not from the tribe of Yehuda. He was from the tribe of Benjamin. And nevertheless, it says here that he was the leader of the generation. So it could be there was a time and a point where the leader of the generation wasn't necessarily someone from the house of King David, or maybe, I don't know, some other answer, but it's a question.
right.
Yeah.
Is it like during the time of when they were in Israel, and then after Galus, you have someone else? Or...
Maybe at that time where they were building Beis Hamikdash was different. Maybe after Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, then it's more down the line of King David's descendants. I'm not sure. And if anybody has an answer to the question through your own research, or maybe you go to somebody for Shabbos and he has the question and they say, yeah, no problem, it's this, please bring it back to the class. The third thing, then after he does this, he explains, no, so that's the order of the Maimon. First, that Moshe Rabbeinu reveals and internalized Amunah, then that all the tzaddikim return the Amunah that in every generation, and then he concludes that mainly it's the later generations and not the Moshe's generation, because in Moshe's generation, they didn't need that higher level of Amunah that comes from the essence. Now comes the question. And according to the above, the causes are more at this point, that when a person is crushed, it brings out the essence. So according to that, this is connected to the thought that Moshe is the one who connects Yidden. That Moshe that Moshe and his extension in all the generations connect Yidden with Or Sof. But in the pasuk it says, "Kosis lamor v'hemshech leviyikhu elecha Shem azayizach." According to the Maimer, Kosis lamor, the fact that we're crushed brings out the essence, is connected to Moshe Rabbeinu, connecting us to Hashem. But in the pasuk, the association between crushing an olive for the oil is connected to the other part of the pasuk where it says to bring the oil to Moshe, which is about what we're giving Moshe, not what Moshe is giving us. Remember, in the Maimer, he started off saying that there are two things that happen. Moshe enhances our avoda, and we enhance his. So up until now, we explained Moshe enhanced our avoda by internalizing our amunah. And when does that happen? When we're crushed. That's when the deepest amunah comes out. But in the pasuk, he associates the crushing of the olive to enhancing Moshe's avoda, not enhancing our avoda, because he talks about crushing of the olive regarding bringing the oil to Moshe. So how do we reconcile these two things? So now he's going to introduce something new, and here we're coming to the thrust of the whole Maimer. Page 60, 61. Is this verse, this pasuk, that the Yidden accepted that which they began years ago. So the Rebbe is raising a question here. The Yidden accepted the Torah fully, which they began 1,000 years earlier by Har Sinai. When did they accept it? When did this happen? Before the miracle, when they were still under the pressure of the decree, or did it happen after the miracle? They were so excited they accepted Hashem fully. So if one person says before, there's got to be someone else in the room that's going to say.
I say
no,
before.
What? You
I
say
think it was before.
Right.
As they were getting it,
What?
as they were getting the Torah. That's what it-
Right, but we're talking about now in the times of Haman. Was it during the decree that they accepted Hashem fully? Or that after the miracle, when Hashem saved all their lives, then they accepted Hashem
No,
fully?
it was during the
During the decree. 'cause
During the
that's when they
decree.
started
They
listening
already
to
accepted it, even
Mordecai.
though they didn't get like the info, not a price. The reward, right?
Right.
They were already like ready. to accept it.
Okay, so here's the interesting thing. The simple pshat is the opposite. You've been hanging around Chassidus so long that this became the simple pshat. But the simple pshat is the opposite. They were in danger. Hashem performed the miracle. And after this miracle, they were so inspired that they accepted Hashem with a full heart and full soul like never ever before, and their commitment became full. But the Rebbe is now introducing that there's another way of understanding it, that, yeah,
Two extremes. With Moshe, the condition is ideal, like you
right.
and with Mordecai, like two extremes of the same thing. And then in terms of accepting and inviting the
Well, we've been explaining the whole time the reason why they were able to accept was because they were crushed. So obviously that's before the decree was dissolved. That was during the decree, like you all said. But actually, if you learn the pshat, the simple pasuk, if you follow it, it seems that no, it means after the decree. They were so happy and so excited that they accepted it. So now, the Rebbe is going to explain the difference, and the Rebbe is actually going to explain that both are true. There was a certain acceptance during the decree, and there was another level of acceptance after the decree. And the question is going to be, during the decree, we understand because they were forced. I mean, they were under pressure. They were being crushed. But after the decree, when they're no longer crushed, what brought out the essence at that time? Okay, so let's see this inside. Again, so what we're saying is that both are true. It was actually two stages in their full acceptance. One stage is like where they fully accepted. There was another stage where they fully accepted before. But the question is, before we understand they were being crushed, but after Hashem saved them and they're not being crushed anymore, where did they get the strength? Acceptance that comes from the essence. What revealed the essence after they were finally back in a good place? So it goes like this. Again, let's start from the first paragraph on page 60, 61, where it says now, V'yesh Leimer. The Masha Kosaba Maimer. When it says in the Maimer that the Kibbalis Asher Chelu Lases, that the Yidden accepted what they began 1,000 years earlier. Shvimei Achashverish, in the days of Achashverish, Kiblu Masher Chelu Matan Torah, they accepted and confirmed what they began 1,000 years earlier at Har Sinai. It also is consistent and it could be aligned with the simple pshat that they accepted it after the miracle. And both are true. But how could it be? So based on this, when it says that the Yidden in the times of Purim re-accepted the Torah fully, there's two inyanim. One was the accepting in the time of the Gzeira, and that came through Mesiras Nefesh. And the other is when they accepted the Torah fully after the miracle, and that's even higher than accepting it during the time of the Gzeira. So even though we just explained how when there's a decree and we're crushed, that brings out the essence, the Rebbe is saying it could also happen after the miracle. And not only also, but after the miracle, their acceptance was even deeper and greater than during the times of the decree. How could it be if they're not being crushed? And only the crushing of the olive brings out that oil. So this is related to being crushed, to bringing out the essence, that there's two kinds of, and two situations in being crushed. When Yidden are being crushed, because there's Gezeirus al Kiyum Torah mitzvahs, because there are decrees against the observance of Torah mitzvahs, that the governments are issuing decrees against Jews. Because they're Jews, they have no rights and they have no privileges, and they have to live in ghettos and they have to pay higher taxes, and they're not allowed to keep Shabbos, they're not allowed to do Bris Milah, all the decrees that we had throughout the ages. And like the decrees, page 62, 63, that were in the times when the previous Rebbe said this mimer. That was one of those times that there was decrees. The communist regime didn't allow yeshiva, cheder, mitzvahs. They were out to everything. If you did any of these things, you would be arrested. But then there's another thing, that even in a time when the Yidden are enjoying prosperity, which means everything is good, begashmias, and things are good, beruchnias, like here in the United States of America, and in most of the civilized world, but we're still in Gullus. And we're sort of crushed from the fact that even though things are good, we're still in Gullus. That's the point the Rebbe is going to go into. Let's do the brackets. For example, this is what happened after Purim. I just want to just say something before we go there, and that is, the Rebbe is going to bring a quote from Gemara that in the time of Purim, we were still servants or slaves to Achashverosh. What does it mean? The Gemara is talking about comparing the Ness of Purim to the Ness of Pesach. Pesach was redemption and Purim was redemption. What's the difference? And the Gemara says, in the times of Pesach, we went out of Egypt. We were no longer under the rulership of Egypt. In the times of Purim, even though our lives were saved and we saw great miracles and we were granted the freedom, but we were still under the rule of the king of that time, of Achashverosh. So it wasn't a complete redemption like in the times of Pesach. So let's look inside. So the Yidden, it's at the end, after the miracle, it says, and the Jewish people had Oira v'simcha v'sasam v'ikar, which means, we say this every Mitzvah Shabbos, when we do Havdalah, we say these words out loud, everyone says it together, and there was light, and there was joy, and there was gladness, and there was honor for the Jewish people. And this has the simple meaning, and it also has the deeper meaning. And the deeper meaning, the Gemara says, Ora means they now could learn Torah easily. Simcha means they can observe the Yom Tovim easily. Nothing obstructing their observance of Yom Tov. Sasan is the mitzvah of Milah, and Yikar is the mitzvah of Tefillin. These were things that in Hamas times they couldn't do, and now they could do it. So that means physically and spiritually, there's no longer any oppression. Not only that, Shagam Beis Haman Niton Esther, it was a complete victory. Not only Haman did not triumph over the Jewish people, but we ended up with Haman's house. Haman's house was given to Esther. On the surface, okay, big deal. So his house was given to Esther. But spiritually, this means it's hapcha. Not only Klippa was eliminated, but it's more than that. The Klippa was transformed. That this building, which was the building that was the house that accommodated this very, very wicked person who wanted to wipe out every single Jew in the world, it was turned around, and now this very same house became a place to accommodate Mordechai and Esther. One of the fascinating things that happened during the war in Iraq, the Persian Gulf War, was, I think I mentioned this more than once, that was the time that the Rebbe started the campaign and said that based on a medrash, this is now the coming of Mashiach is imminent. But the Rebbe then said that Iraq is Babylon. Iraq, the physical location, the geographic location, Iraq and Iran, we don't know exactly where to draw the line, but that area is Babylon. So the people of Iraq maybe are not Babylonians from those days, they might be different people, but the geographic location is definitely Babylon. And the man who was the head of Iraq, whose name was Saddam Hussein, he was the one who started this war, and he was the one who vowed to wipe out every single Jew. He always said that he's a reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar. and he has to finish the job of destroying the Beis Hamikdash. And of course, at the end, we saw the miracle that not only he didn't do any harm to the Jewish people, but he himself was caught and he was executed. And there was that. But it was what was interesting was there were a lot of Jewish soldiers. Do you remember when the war ended? Remember I told you when did the war end? Ended on Purim. And there were a lot of Jewish soldiers that needed services for Pesach. And they needed a place to make a seder for a few hundred soldiers. You know what they used? They used his palace, right? They used his palace to make a seder for Pesach, which means this is a skapia. This was a place that was the pride of Klippa, and now it turned around. It's being used for a seder for Pesach to make brachas and serve Hashem. So that's the Ishapcha. So the Rebbe is saying, look at what happened after the miracle. It was good and plenty, physically, materially, and spiritually. The Yidden had whatever they needed, no more persecution, no more oppression. Spiritually, they can do whatever they want now. Not only that, but the house of Haman was given to Esther. The only thing that was wrong was Akate Avda Achashverosh Anan. We were still servants to Achashverosh, which means we still weren't in Eretz Yisrael. We didn't have the Beis Hamikdash, and we didn't have our own king. The Yidden were broken and crushed from the very fact that it was still not out of Golus. But the causes the Yisrael, so this is an incredible thing the Rebbe writes here. And I think without studying Chassidus, it's almost impossible to even relate to it. But when you read this, you can begin to understand the Rebbe's constant talk and campaign and heart-rendering begging and pleading with all his heart and soul to do whatever we can to bring Mashiach. What does the Rebbe say here? That even when you didn't have it good, and it's good physically, and it's good, like take for example, the life we live now, Baruch Hashem. A Yid has all the privileges like any other citizen in this country and in England, and like I said, in almost all the civilized countries in the world, we have all the privileges. At the same time, physically, not only things are good, money Jews today are like wealthy, have 5 homes, private planes, but even those that didn't get to that point, like myself, they're still Baruch Hashem. How could you compare our life today to the life in the old country, where the whole family cramped into 1 or 2 rooms, and all the poverty that you can't even compare. In fact, if you look on a map, not a map, I want to say not a map, if you look on a graph, of poverty today and poverty years ago, the whole world can't even compare the percentage of how much of the world was in poverty then and how much was in poverty now, and especially Yidden. And we see Yidden, Baruch Hashem, wealthy, and they're supporting yeshivas and all sorts of chesed funds, hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. It's a time of Baruch Hashem, we have what we need physically and spiritually. Besides the fact that, of course, there are Yidden on a personal level. Somebody's sick, somebody's poor, but generally speaking, you can't compare. And yet, I'll get to you in a second, we're crushed with all the goodness. And even if everything was good, nobody would be sick and nobody would have, I'm still crushed just from the fact that we're still in Golus. And that feeling of being crushed can also bring out the deepest level of the soul, which is the essence of the soul. Yes, Khan.
When you were talking about the descendant of Ibu, what was the name?
Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah. Being executed, like, are Jews allowed to rejoice when a human being is killed, or is it like the threat has been eradicated, that you can celebrate, and then you're just great about the fact that like he was killed?
That's the way it's supposed to be, right? Yeah. We don't, Jews don't enjoy. In fact, we just read the story about going out of Mitzrayim, and the Egyptians were drowned. They didn't sang a song to Hashem, and it says that they were prosecuting angels. It said, "How could you do this? My creation is drowning in the water, and you're singing." So the answer is, we weren't singing because they're drowning. We're singing because we don't have the fear. As long as this didn't happen, the fear of Egypt was still upon them. So it was about the redemption and about freedom. But yes, if a Jew would rejoice about someone else's suffering, you're developing a nature which is sadistic nature. Yeah. I still remember once when the Rebbe was speaking about being careful that only brachas should come out of our mouth. We should never, ever pronounce the opposite of a blessing. And he added and he said, and this is both Jews and non-Jews, for everybody. And of course, you have to just remember one thing, which makes it a little bit confusing. But sometimes you see people having a certain attitude. Our generation here today, is a post-Holocaust generation. In other words, you're talking about people that either they themselves or their parents or grandparents were killed in a very sadistic way by the Nazis, by the communists, just shot and killed and tortured. So it's natural that people don't have the most positive feelings about them. The fact that if someone would generalize them and say non-Jews, that's obviously the wrong thing to say. But the fact that there's such feelings of anger and even hate sometimes is because you're talking about someone that, their father, their mother, their grandfather, their grandmother was sent to jail, killed, and so on and so forth, all these kind of things. Yep.
I just how during the trial stage, there was a huge knuckle there about culpability since it was a chain of different tasks.
Right.
And we talked a lot about Mesiras Nefesh when somebody is at gunpoint and has to choose Judaism over certain
life,
models, for
right.
example. So what about Jews who were enslaved in camps once people were killed, but had to deal with taking bodies? I know it's really gruesome, but it's no longer, they're not handling Jews who are alive. So did they still have a share, what was their, I'm assuming they were exonerated, right, from blame?
Of course. I mean, can't blame anybody who went
Right.
through one day in the Holocaust. If
Yeah.
I know people that tell the stories of what happened there. All you have to hear is sort of one day what they went through, and you can't even imagine how they survived it. So it's true. Yes, actually, there were books that were written of sort of response to questions and answers in halacha during the Holocaust. What do we do about this? What about choices? It was there was a rabbi who used to live here in the East Side, and he wrote a book of, put together books of questions that people asked him during the Holocaust. It was a very hard time to answer questions. So we're so grateful that we live in the time that we live. They're always referred to America, let's say, as a Malchus Shel Chesed, a kingdom of kindness. And again, it's not just America, it's really the whole world today, the whole civilized world. The only place where Jews today are, in a way, threatened mainly is in certain Arab countries. And even that started to change recently, big change. So therefore, everything is good. And yet, you feel crushed for the mere fact that we're in Golos. Why? That he's going to explain later. But the Rebbe is going to explain that if the being crushed brings out the essence of the neshama, so even after the miracle, we're still crushed just from being on Golos. And that's why it was able to draw out the essence of our neshama. And we accepted the Torah in a complete way. I mean, one of the things that people had a hard time understanding when the Rebbe would speak about Mashiach, and the Rebbe would literally, you can't call it screaming, it was the soul was just screaming at Mosai, how long do we have to be in Golos? And the Golos should end, and we need to be with Mashiach, we need to do the Beis HaMikdash. The reaction of many people was what's the urgency? We're no longer in the shtetl, we're no longer, I mean, when it comes, the time will come. What are we, can't you live without it? You learn Torah, you do mitzvahs, you have everything you need. Yeah, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so I can't bring a sacrifice, so I can't live without that. I can't bring a sacrifice. I don't see the Kohanim in the Beis HaMikdash. So why is it the end of the world? And here the Rebbe is going to explain it. What is it that a person feels crushed? So the reason why the Gemara says what the Gemara says is there was a question, why don't we say Hallel on Purim? We say Hallel Hanukkah. We say Hallel Pesach. Why don't we say Hallel Purim? And this is the Gemara's answer, because Purim, even though there was a miracle, but we were still under the rule of Achashverosh. I guess in the times of Hanukkah, we got our own king. That was Yehuda HaMaccabee and the family of the Chashmonaim. The times of Purim, Pesach, of course, we went out of Egypt and we had our own king, Moshe Rabbeinu. But in times of Purim, we still had a king of Persia over our heads. So that's the example of a time where there was a miracle, there was freedom, we had everything we needed, but we're still in Golus, and for that alone, they were crushed. And they were so crushed that the essence came out and they received the Torah on a much higher level.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
how is it that like in terms of accepting the Torah,
Right.
they're both outside of New Dollars? Like
No, you give me the answer. You know the answer. What's the answer? It's a very good question. Ariella is asking, how could it be that accepting the Torah, out of all places, happened outside of Golus? I mean, outside in the time of Golus. This is the answer. Because to accept the Torah on the highest level has to come from the essence. And the only place where you could really draw out the essence is when Chas v'Shalom, there is Golus. That's the reason why there's Golus. Hashem didn't make the Golus to torture us. He made the Golus to bring out the deepest depth of our essence. If you ever did physical therapy, you ever went to a place where they do exercise, they always make you work hard. Right? I remember I had my back problem. I go to this place, they make me lift something which weighs 10 pounds. It was very difficult. But after a few times, it became easy. Then the guy says, okay, now we're making it 15 pounds. I said, wait a second, he made it easy. What are you torturing me for? And after we got it to 15 pounds, he says, now you're gonna lift 20 pounds. What are you doing to me? And the answer is, there's no way to develop the muscle unless you lift something that's heavier. So basically, the only way to bring out the oil, to bring out the wine, is when you crush the grape, when you crush. Now, so again, we don't know why Hashem made this system, but this is the system, and that's the purpose of Golus. The purpose of Golus is, we just had a mimer from the Alter Rebbe in Torah Or, with last week's Parsha, where he talks about that Golus is compared to planting a seed. What happens? You take a seed and you put it in the ground. And basically, I'm taking a seed and throwing it away. And not only that, I put it in the ground. Whoever knows anything about agriculture and knows anything about planting seeds is once it goes into the ground, the seed itself deteriorates and gets absorbed in the soil. And then something grows. So the reason why I take this seed and I'm sort of throwing it away, putting it in the ground, and it becomes nothing, is not to become nothing, is because after this, what grows out is a tree with hundreds of leaves and hundreds of branches and hundreds of fruits, much, much more than what was here before. I can never have that benefit from the seed like I have from the tree. And the tree is so much bigger. So when Hashem uses the analogy that I put you into Golus, Hashem says, I planted a seed. Because being in Golus is like being put into the ground, going through all the difficulties, the oppression, but the purpose is to be higher. So when you ask a question, how is it that the Torah was completed only in Golus? That's the answer, because Golus brings out the greatest depth of the soul. But then the Rebbe asks, okay, that's when there was a decree, but after the decree, what was the problem? And the Rebbe answers, because even after the decree, I'm still crushed just from the fact that we're in Golus. We don't have a Beis Hamikdash, we don't have our own king. That alone makes us crushed. We'll soon see why. And not only that, but that feeling of being crushed is even greater than being crushed because of the decrees. There's one thing which I want to explain. I don't know if I have enough time, but no, I don't have enough time. Well, maybe I'll start with a question. There's something which we spoke about a few times, not a few times, we're speaking about it from the beginning, but I didn't really explain it. And that is, how come the receiving the Torah wasn't complete? What was the reason? Remember?
Hashem put the mountain.
Put the mountain over their head. So when they said Nasa v'nishma, it wasn't 100% willingly, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now if we say that they accepted the Torah before the miracle, when they had the decree, so what's the difference? Same thing. What's the difference if you have a mountain over your head or you have Haman over your head? The same idea.
One's from Hashem. I mean, they're both from Hashem, but
But is it that if we're saying that when you have a mountain over your head, your acceptance is not fully because you're threatened. Here they were threatened with the mountain. Here they were threatened with Haman.
We have a choice. Instead. Like we have a choice of like not accepting the Torah, obviously. But with Hashem, we want just like ends up with it.
No, we also had a choice. You could accept the Torah and then have the mountain on top of your head.
Yeah,
No, he's saying you had a choice that they could have converted and gone to another religion. But it's still, the acceptance is still, in a way, it's still, in some ways, the same problem. So there's a very beautiful, beautiful explanation in Chassidus. It comes up later in the Maimah, but I can't contain myself, so I'm going to give it now. And that is, and we need a little bit more time, but let me just give the general idea. In Chassidus, it brings out that a mountain represents love. In fact, it says that Avraham Avinu, he called the Beis Mikdash a mountain. Yitzchak, he referred to the Beis Mikdash as a field. Yaakov, he referred to the Beis Mikdash as a house. They were all talking about the same thing, but Avraham Avinu called it the mountain, Yitzchak called it the field, and Yaakov called it a house. And there's a pasuk for each one. So how come they had different names? The answer is because each one represented a different attribute. Abraham was Chesed, Yitzchak was Gevura, Yaakov was Rachamim or Tiferes. So each one perceived the Beis Hamikdash through the eyes of their attribute. So Abraham was Chesed, which is he served Hashem with love. Yitzchak served Hashem with fear. So that means that Abraham Avinu's main attribute was love, and that's expressed in a mountain. What's the mountain? Just in a simple way, look at the mountain this way. There's earth, that's straight, and then the earth rises and comes up. Love is a feeling where I'm sort of extending myself. I'm being drawn outside of myself to another person. So therefore, the physical structure of a mountain, in a way, is like describing the feeling of love, where I'm being drawn to someone. What does it mean that Hashem held the mountain over their head? There's a principle in Chassidus, and it's based on a pasuk in the Torah, where it says that just like the water reflects a person's face, that's how one heart reflects another person's heart. Which means if a person has love for someone, according to the natural order, the other person's heart will respond with a feeling of love for them. That's natural. If someone shows you how much they love you, it makes you feel good about them. And in fact, this might be one of the reasons why, let's say, in the whole dating system, there's a lot of laws of tznius that are applied, and that people have to be sort of limited and restricted in what they say and how they say, because the truth is, if one of the two parties would sort of be speaking in overwhelming terms how much they love the other party, and then they feel the same to them, they can never be sure if that's real love coming from me, or I'm just sort of reflecting the other person's feelings for me, so I feel for them. And then when things settle, sort of you find that I don't have that feeling that I had before. When two people are going out together and they contain their feeling, they don't show it so openly outside, and nevertheless I feel attracted to this person, I feel that I love this person, you know that it's emes. So again, if one person, a human being, shows another person how much they love them, naturally the heart will respond. It's like a reaction that the heart will have toward them. Hashem, when he gave us the Torah, it wasn't he held a mountain overhead and he wanted to kill us. Chassidus explains Hashem revealed to us that we should feel his infinite love for us. Hashem's love for us is not measured, it's not finite, it's infinite. And we felt it. So what happened to us? Then we felt love for Hashem. So we accepted the Torah with the greatest love that you could imagine. Oh, Rabbi is here already. Greatest love you could imagine, but the love was imposed upon us by Hashem rather than coming from us. And that's why it's considered incomplete. Food for thought, and we'll continue this on Monday. Mirza Hashem. Have a great Shabbos, everybody. We'll give the floor to Rabbi Gasinski. Chassidus too.
Did any Jews at the time of Purim like converted?
No, nobody. That's what it says. Not even one Jew. Not only they didn't convert, they didn't even have a thought. It didn't even dawn on them the thought to do something like that.
Sima is waiting for you downstairs.
Okay.
She's in the,
Okay.